When Daniel and his family moved into their dream home, everything seemed perfect. But at night, the house came alive. Footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. The baby monitor picked up whispers. One night, Daniel woke up to find his daughter standing by his bed. Her eyes were wide. "Daddy, the woman in my closet says you don't belong here." Daniel, his wife Rachel, and their 6-year-old daughter Lily moved into a beautiful old house in the countryside. The place was huge, with tall windows, wooden floors, and a dark basement the landlord never mentioned. The previous owners had left in a hurry. "Feels like a fresh start," Rachel said, smiling. But on the first night, Lily woke up crying. Rachel rushed to her. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Lily pointed to the closet. There was a lady standing there. Rachel sighed. "It's just your imagination, honey." She tucked Lily in. But outside the room, Daniel saw something strange. The closet door was slightly open, and inside a shadow moved. Days passed, and weird things started happening. Lights flickered. Doors opened on their own. They heard scratching from inside the walls. One night, Daniel checked the baby monitor. His heart stopped. The screen showed Lily sleeping. But there was someone sitting on the edge of her bed. A woman. Daniel rushed to the room. But the second he opened the door, she was gone. Lily was awake. "Daddy," she whispered. "She said she used to live here." Daniel's hand shook. "Who, Lily?" Lily turned toward the closet. "The woman in the walls." Daniel had had enough. He called the landlord. "There's something wrong with this house." Silence. Then the landlord spoke, his voice shaking. "Don't go into the basement." Click. The call ended. Daniel's blood ran cold. That night, as he passed the basement door, he saw deep scratch marks around the lock, like something had been trying to get out. At 3 a.m., a loud thump shook the house. Daniel shot up. It came from the basement. He grabbed a flashlight and slowly turned the handle. Unlocked. The door creaked open. A rotting smell rushed out. His flashlight flickered as he stepped inside. Then he saw them. Hundreds of photographs, pinned to the walls. All of his family, taken from inside the house. Rachel woke up to find the bed empty. "Daniel," she called. Silence. She searched the house until she saw the basement door wide open. Her heart pounded. She ran downstairs. Daniel stood in front of the wall of photos. His face was pale. Then something moved in the darkness. Rachel grabbed his arm. "We're leaving," a deep voice whispered behind them. Too late. A cold hand grabbed Rachel's ankle. She screamed. They ran upstairs, slamming the door. Bang! 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 Something pounded from below. Then it stopped. Rachel sobbed. "We need to get Lily." But when they reached her room, the closet door was open, and Lily was gone. Daniel and Rachel tore through the house. "Lily!" A whisper slithered through the air. "She's with us now." Rachel fell to her knees, sobbing. Then Daniel saw it. A small trap door behind the closet. His hands trembled as he yanked it open. Inside, Lily, curled up, shivering, and behind her, a woman's decayed face, her blackened lips curled into a smile. Daniel grabbed Lily and slammed the trapdoor shut. They ran. Out of the house. Into the night. They never looked back. Days later, police investigated. But the basement, completely empty. No photos, no scratches. Like nothing ever happened. But as the family drove away for good, Lily turned back to the house. Her small voice whispered, "She's still watching." Inside the window, a woman's shadow smiled. Ethan was lost. His car broke down on an empty road, and the only place nearby was a small town hidden in the woods. The streets were silent. The houses were empty. But as night fell, Ethan saw figures standing in the windows. At midnight, a voice whispered behind him, "You shouldn't have come here." Ethan's car sputtered and died. "Great," he muttered, checking his phone. No signal. The road stretched empty for miles. Then through the trees, he spotted a small town. No signs, no people. Just old wooden houses. He walked down the main street. Shops were stocked but abandoned. Cars sat parked, keys still in the ignitions. Like everyone had left in the middle of their day. The hairs on his neck rose. Something felt wrong. Then from the corner of his eye, he saw it. A woman standing in a window. She wasn't moving, just staring. When he blinked, she was gone. Ethan knocked on a diner's door. Nothing. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The place was spotless, like it had just been used. Then behind the counter, he found a handwritten note. If you hear them whisper, don't answer. Ethan's pulse quickened. Hear who? He muttered. Then, a soft voice. Hello? He spun around. The diner was empty. The voice came again, closer. Come outside. A shadow moved past the window. Ethan backed away. Something was waiting for him. As the sun set, the town grew colder. Ethan ran back to his car, trying to start it. Nothing. Then he saw them. Figures standing in the doorways. Still. Motionless. Watching. One by one, they stepped onto the street, their heads tilted at an unnatural angle. Their mouths didn't move, but Ethan heard them whispering. It slithered through the air, inside his mind. Stay with us. He covered his ears. It didn't help. Then he saw a gas station at the end of the road. If he could just make it there. Ethan sprinted. The whispers grew louder. His body felt heavy, slower, like something was pulling him back. He reached the gas station, slammed the door and locked it. Panting, he looked outside. The figures had stopped. They stood in a perfect circle around the station, just staring. Then a single tap came from behind him. Inside. Ethan turned slowly. A mirror hung on the wall, but his reflection was wrong. It smiled and whispered, You're already one of us. Ethan grabbed a wrench and smashed the mirror. A loud scream filled the gas station. Outside, the figures twitched violently. A piece of paper fluttered from the broken mirror. It was a photo of himself. But the date on it was from 50 years ago. His breath caught. The whispers returned, softer this time. You were never supposed to leave. Ethan ran, back to his car. This time, when he turned the key, it roared to life. He sped away, never looking back. As he hit the main road, his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. See you when you come back home. His blood ran cold. In the rearview mirror, the town was gone. But in the back seat, a figure sat smiling. Mia was taking the last train home after work. She dozed off for just a second. When she woke up, the train was empty. The lights flickered. The windows were blacked out. Then over the intercom, a voice whispered, Next stop? Nowhere. Mia sighed as she boarded the train. It was almost midnight, and she was exhausted. The train was half empty. Just a few late-night passengers scattered around. She found a seat and leaned back, closing her eyes for just a moment. The train rumbled forward. When she opened her eyes, everyone was gone. Mia sat up, heart racing. The train was still moving, but it felt different. The air was too still. The usual announcements were missing. She grabbed her phone. No service. Then a soft knock came from the window. She turned slowly. A face was pressed against the glass, but the train was underground. There was no way anyone could be outside. The lights flickered. A garbled voice came over the intercom. Now approaching, the last stop. Mia's stomach twisted. She checked the map. This station didn't exist. The train slowed. The doors hissed open. The platform outside was wrong. The walls were cracked. The signs were blank. Mia didn't move. Then she heard footsteps. A group of people boarded, but something was off. Their clothes were from different decades. Their faces were pale, sunken. They all turned to look at her. One man sat beside her, grinning. You fell asleep, didn't you? He whispered. Mia's breath hitched. How do you know that? She asked. The man chuckled. That's how we all got here. Mia ran. She pushed past the passengers, reaching for the emergency exit. Locked. The windows were sealed shut. She turned back. The other passengers were standing now, silent, watching. Then the intercom crackled. Next stop! Forever! Mia screamed, pounding on the doors. The train picked up speed. The man from before laughed softly. You can't leave, he whispered. You're one of us now. Mia's vision blurred. The train shifted. The walls melted into darkness. She felt herself slipping away. Then, a hand grabbed hers. Mia gasped. She was back in her seat. The train was full again. Her stop was being announced. She bolted upright. Had it been a dream? Shaking, she ran off the train just before the doors closed. The train sped away. But as she caught her breath, she saw something that made her heart stop. Her reflection in the station glass. She wasn't alone. Behind her, the grinning man stood, whispering in her ear. Jason was just passing through. A small town, a quick stop, and then back on the road. But something was off. The people were too friendly. Their smiles were too wide. As night fell, Jason realized no one ever left this town. The next morning he tried to leave, but every road led back to the same place. Then he saw it, his own missing person flyer pinned to the town's notice board. Dated 2 years ago, Jason had been driving for hours. The highway stretched empty for miles. His gas light blinked. "Damn," he muttered, scanning for a station. A road sign appeared. "Welcome to Ravenshade." A small town tucked between thick, endless woods. As he pulled in, he noticed something strange. There were no cars, just smiling people watching him from their porches. Jason stopped at a diner. Inside, everyone turned to look at him. A waitress with 2 red lipstick grinned. "Passing through?" He nodded. "Not many people stop here," she said, pouring coffee. "You should stay." Jason laughed nervously. "Just need gas." Silence. Then, everyone laughed all at once. The sound sent chills down his spine. He paid quickly and left. As he walked to his car, he saw a group of people standing perfectly still in the middle of the street. Watching him, Jason floored the gas pedal. The town disappeared behind him. But 5 minutes later, he was back. Same road, same town sign. Impossible. His heart pounded. He tried a different route, but every turn led back to Ravenshade. A man stepped onto the road, forcing Jason to stop. It was the town sheriff. "You should rest," the sheriff said, smiling. "It's late." Jason's blood ran cold. The sun had just been up, but now it was pitch black. Jason needed answers. He stormed into the sheriff's office, and that's when he saw them. Dozens of missing person flyers, all from different decades. Same town, same story. Then his stomach twisted. His own face stared back at him. The paper was faded, dated 2 years ago. Jason stumbled back, shaking. "No, this isn't real." The sheriff appeared behind him. "You're home now," he whispered. Jason bolted for the door. But outside, everyone was waiting, hundreds of smiling faces. And all at once they whispered, "You belong to us now." Jason ran. The town shifted. Streets stretched and twisted. No way out. Then he saw it. A stone altar in the town square. Dark stains covered the surface. Jason wasn't the first. He wouldn't be the last. The mayor stepped forward, smiling. "It's tradition," she said. Jason fought, kicked, screamed. But they held him down. The stars above flickered. The air grew thick. A deep, inhuman voice rumbled through the night. The town itself was alive. It fed on outsiders. Jason felt his body sink into the ground. The last thing he heard was the town laughing. The next day, Ravenshade was quiet again. The streets empty. The missing person wall had one more flyer, Jason's photo. Then, a car rolled into town. A new traveler, lost and looking for gas. The townspeople smiled, waiting. Michael and his wife, Claire, just bought their first home. It was old but charming, a perfect place to start fresh. Then one night, Michael found a door in the basement, a door that wasn't there before. It had no handle, no hinges, just a solid black surface. And at exactly 3:33 a.m., something knocked from the other side. Michael and Claire moved into the house on a warm summer evening, their dream home. The realtor had mentioned it was over 100 years old, but Michael didn't care. It was perfect, until the first night. Claire was unpacking upstairs when Michael decided to check out the basement. Dusty, dark, smelled of old wood. But as he turned to leave, he saw it. A black door on the far wall. It wasn't in the house's blueprints, and it definitely wasn't there earlier. That night, Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Then, knock. His breath hitched. It came from below, from the basement. Slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Claire stirred. "Did you hear that?" Michael swallowed. It's probably the pipes. But he knew better. The knocks were too perfect, too rhythmic, and they stopped exactly at 3:33 a.m. The next morning, Michael went to check. The black door was closer. It had moved, only by a few inches, but it was undeniable. Michael felt a cold sweat drip down his back. Something was trying to get out. He grabbed a hammer, pounded on the wood. It didn't make a sound, like it wasn't even real. Then, scratch. A deep, slow scrape from the other side. Michael backed away. Something was in there, and it knew he was listening. That night, Claire woke up screaming. Michael jolted upright. What happened? Her face was pale, drenched in sweat. I saw something, she whispered. In the mirror. Michael's stomach twisted. Claire pointed to the bathroom. Michael stepped in and froze. The mirror was covered in handprints. Small, twisted, wrong. And in the center, a single word was written, "Let me in." Michael had had enough. He grabbed a crowbar, went to the basement. Tonight, he would end this. The black door was now in the center of the room, like it was waiting for him. His breath was shaky. He raised the crowbar and swung. Crack! The wood split. A deep, gurgling laugh echoed from the other side. Then the door swung open on its own. Michael's scream died in his throat. A shadow stepped out, featureless, grinning. It whispered, "You knocked first." The next morning, the house was empty. Michael and Claire were gone. The black door vanished. Weeks later, a new family moved in. That night at 3:33 a.m., they heard a knock. Dylan always knew his childhood home had secrets, but when he returned after 20 years, he discovered something impossible. A new door at the end of the hallway, a door that wasn't there before. His mother's voice trembled when she saw it. "Dylan, we don't have a room there." But at night he heard breathing from the other side, and when he opened it, the room already had pictures of him inside. Dylan's father had passed away, leaving his childhood home to him. He hadn't been back in 20 years. The house felt smaller than he remembered. His mother greeted him with a weak smile. "It's good to have you back," she said. But something was off. She kept glancing down the hallway, as if she was afraid to look. That night, Dylan noticed it. A new door at the end of the hallway. He frowned. That part of the house had always been a solid wall. "Mom," he called, pointing. "What's in there?" Her face drained of color. She grabbed his wrist, shaking her head. "We don't have a room there." Dylan's stomach twisted. He reached for the knob. His mother screamed, "Don't open it!" That night, Dylan lay awake. At exactly 2:14 a.m., he heard it. Soft breathing, coming from inside the new room. He crept out of bed, heart pounding. The door was slightly open. His hands trembled as he pushed it wider. Inside was a fully furnished bedroom, and on the walls, hundreds of pictures of him, taken at different stages of his life. Some were from today. Dylan ran to his mother, shaking her awake. "What's in that room?" he demanded. Tears filled her eyes. "You were never supposed to see it," she whispered. "Dad, he built that door before he died." Dylan's breath hitched. "Why?" She gripped his hands. "Because something inside the walls asked him to." A chill ran down Dylan's spine. Then, a whisper from the hallway. "Come back, Dylan. We made this for you." Dylan grabbed a hammer. He was going to tear the room down. He swung at the wall. Crack, a hole opened, and behind it, a tunnel. His stomach lurched. The tunnel stretched deep into the house, and at the end of it, a figure stood, smiling. It had his face, his voice, and it whispered, "Now there's room for both of us." The next morning, Dylan's mother woke up to silence. The new door was gone. Dylan was nowhere to be found. But when she checked the old family photos, there were two versions of Dylan in each picture, both smiling, like he had always been there. When Oliver and his wife Sarah moved into their new home, everything seemed perfect. Then their son Jamie started whispering to someone in the walls. "There are kids in there," Jamie giggled. At night, Oliver and Sarah heard tiny footsteps scurrying through the house. Then one night, Jamie whispered, "They want me to play with them. Forever." And the next morning, he was gone. Oliver and Sarah had searched for years before finding the perfect house. A Victorian home, untouched for decades. The seller gave them a huge discount. "The house just needs a family again," he said. Sarah was thrilled, but Oliver felt uneasy. The house was too quiet, like it was listening. Their 5-year-old son, Jamie, adjusted quickly. Too quickly. By the second day, he had someone to play with. "Who are you talking to, buddy?" Oliver asked. Jamie grinned. "The children in the walls." Oliver's stomach twisted. Sarah laughed. "He just has an active imagination." That night, as Oliver passed Jamie's room, he heard whispers from inside the walls. At exactly 2 a.m., Oliver woke up. Scurrying sounds, like tiny feet running through the walls. Sarah stirred beside him. "Did you hear that?" Oliver nodded, heart pounding. They followed the sound to Jamie's room. The closet door was open. Jamie sat on the floor, whispering into the darkness. "Who are you talking to?" Oliver asked. Jamie turned, his eyes glassy. "They say they used to live here. They say we can stay forever, too." The next day, Oliver searched the house. Something was off. He checked the blueprints and froze. There was a hidden room behind Jamie's closet. He grabbed a crowbar and pried open the wall. Inside, tiny beds, tiny toys, dust-covered dolls. It was a children's bedroom. Then he saw them. Little handprints smeared on the walls, as if something had been trapped inside. That night, Jamie vanished. His bed was empty. His closet door was wide open. Sarah sobbed. Oliver grabbed a flashlight and crawled into the hidden room. The air was ice cold. At the end of the room was another door, scratched into the wood. "Let us out!" Oliver turned the handle. It creaked open. Inside, Jamie stood in the center of a pitch-black space. His face was blank. Behind him, dozens of tiny figures watched from the dark. Then in unison, they whispered. "We need one more!" Oliver lunged for Jamie, but cold hands grabbed his arms. A girl with hollow eyes whispered in his ear. "Someone must stay!" Sarah screamed from behind. "Take me," she sobbed. The children smiled. Jamie blinked, like waking from a dream. "Mommy?" Oliver pulled Jamie out. As the door slammed shut behind Sarah, the walls trembled. The whispers faded. Sarah was gone, and the hidden room vanished. A year later, Oliver sold the house. He never told anyone what happened. But sometimes at night, Jamie would wake up crying. "They miss me," he whispered. "They say Mommy is lonely." Across the city in the empty house, the closet door creaked open, and inside the darkness, a soft voice whispered, "Come play with us." Nathan had always known something was wrong with his childhood home. It was the reason his family left when he was 10 years old. Now, 20 years later, he was back. The house was exactly the same, except it remembered him. The doors locked on their own. The mirrors reflected things that weren't there. Then one night, he woke up to a voice whispering from the attic. "Welcome home, Nathan. We've been waiting." And when he looked in the mirror, his own reflection was smiling. Nathan never wanted to come back, but after his father's death, the house was his now. The town had changed. The people had aged. But the house, it looked exactly the same, as if time had never touched it. The moment he stepped inside, he felt it. A heavy presence, like something was waiting. Nathan unpacked, trying to shake the unease. But then the front door wouldn't open. He tried the windows. Locked. His chest tightened. Had he locked himself in? Then from upstairs, a loud thump. Nathan turned slowly. The attic door was slightly open, and a voice whispered his name. That night, Nathan tried to sleep, but his room felt off, like someone was watching. He turned over and saw his closet door slowly creaking open. His breath caught. Then something moved inside the mirror. His reflection stood there, grinning. But Nathan wasn't smiling. Nathan searched the house the next morning, and in the basement he found them. Old newspapers, all about his family, and one headline made his blood run cold. "Local family vanishes without a trace." His hands trembled. That article was dated 20 years ago, but he was still here, wasn't he? Nathan had had enough. He grabbed a flashlight and climbed into the attic. Dust. Silence. Then, a single chair sat in the center. Facing it, a mirror. His reflection was already sitting, smiling, waiting. Then it spoke. "You never left." Nathan stumbled back. "No, that's not possible." The reflection stood up and whispered, "Come sit down, we can be whole again." Nathan ran, but the house wouldn't let him go. Every door led back inside. His reflection followed. "Nathan," it whispered, voice warping, "this is where you belong." Nathan fell to his knees, and the last thing he saw was his reflection reaching out, pulling him in. A month later, the house went up for sale. A new family moved in, and their little girl stared into the hallway mirror. "Mommy," she whispered, "there's a man trapped inside." The mirror rippled, and Nathan smiled back, waiting. Ryan was driving home late at night when he took a wrong turn. The road stretched endlessly, the same trees, the same mile markers. After an hour, his gas meter never dropped. After 2 hours, he saw the same man walking on the roadside. And after 3 hours, his phone buzzed with a message. "Stop driving, it's behind you." Ryan glanced at the mirror. A grinning face was staring back from the back seat. Ryan had been on the road for hours. He was exhausted. Just a little further, and he'd be home. Then he saw the detour sign, a shortcut, or so he thought. The road was narrow and quiet, but something felt off. The trees never changed. The air felt too still, and when he checked the clock, an hour had passed, but his gas tank was still full. Ryan shook off the unease until he saw him. A man walking along the roadside, hunched over, head tilted too far. Ryan sped up. Minutes later, the same man was ahead of him again, walking, smiling, like he had never moved. Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel. Something was wrong. His phone buzzed. A text. "Don't stop. Keep driving." Ryan's chest tightened. The number was blocked. Then the radio turned on. Static at first. Then a voice. "He sees you." Ryan's breath hitched. His headlights flickered. And in the rearview mirror, the man was sitting in the back seat. Ryan slammed the brakes. Nothing was there. His heart pounded as he tried turning around. But every turn led back to the same road. His GPS glitched. The road sign ahead still read, "Welcome to Briar Road." But he had seen that sign 10 times already. His phone buzzed again. This time a single word. "Run!" The air grew heavy. Ryan gripped the steering wheel. In the mirror, the man was closer now, still smiling, still staring. And then, the back door slowly creaked open. Ryan jumped out of the car. The road twisted beneath him. The trees whispered his name. Then, he saw it. A second car, wrecked on the side of the road. Inside, his own body, pale, lifeless. The man in the back seat smiled and whispered, "Your turn." Weeks later, another driver took the same road. Lost, tired, and as he drove, his phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. "Don't stop, keep driving." And in the mirror, Ryan smiled back, waiting. Lena had always been curious about the old mansion at the end of the street. For 50 years, no one had lived there. Then one day, she saw a light in the window. That night, she received a message from an unknown number. "Don't go inside, it's awake again." But by the time she checked her phone, she was already on the porch, and the front door swung open on its own. Lena had walked past the Holloway house her entire life. People said it was cursed, that it ate the people who entered. She never believed the stories, until she saw the light. A warm glow in the second-floor window, as if someone was watching. She took a step forward, and her phone buzzed. "Lena, do not go inside." She stared at the screen. The number was blocked. When she looked up, the front door was wide open. The moment Lena stepped inside, the air shifted. The walls breathed. The door slammed shut. She spun around, locked. Her chest tightened. "Hello?" she called. Her voice echoed back. Then, a whisper. "You came back." Lena moved deeper into the house. Dust-covered furniture, faded wallpaper, and on the wall, hundreds of photographs. All of her, taken throughout her life, school days, birthdays, even one from this morning. Her hands shook. A whisper slid through the air. "You've always belonged here." Lena ran. Every door led to the same hallway. The staircase twisted, stretching endlessly. The walls changed behind her. Then she saw it. A figure standing at the top of the stairs, still, watching. Then, it took a step forward. Lena sprinted. She crashed into a room. The floor shifted beneath her. She fell into the walls. The wallpaper peeled back, revealing faces, screaming, trapped inside the house itself. A voice whispered in her ear. "Now it's your turn." Lena clawed at the walls. "No!" she screamed. The faces screamed with her. Then, she saw a mirror. Her reflection was grinning. "I'll take your place." And before Lena could scream, her reflection stepped out, and Lena was pulled inside. A month later, a boy walked past the Holloway house. He saw a light in the window. A girl stood there watching. Her mouth moved silently, but her eyes were screaming. Behind him, his phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. "Don't go inside." But it was too late. The front door swung open, waiting.